This is the Brandy Joe Show, episode number 2 with Joe Kane.
Welcome to another inspiring edition of the Brandy Joe Show, your weekly dose of wealth and wisdom for a prosperous financial life. And here's your host, Brandy Joe Newman.
Joe Kane. What can I say about this man? This man has pretty much given me everything in my career that I could have asked for. He mentored me and is still mentoring me. He recruited me right off the golf course. Gosh, how long ago? 14, 15 years ago almost. And I'm still learning from him. The incredible empathy that Joe has for not only his agents that he works with, but his prospects and his clients that he teaches every day is incredible. He understands where their limits are, and he doesn't push them. He encourages them to get outside of their comfort zone and to learn an economics-based way of managing their personal economy. He has spent over 30 years in the life insurance business educating people like you, but not selling them, educating them and educating you as to why you really want life insurance. And when someone really understands how this product, this vehicle, this instrument works in your financial life, you will want it. And that's really what this particular podcast, episode number 2, is all about. I'm trying to foster this relationship between ordinary, everyday Americans and life insurance. Permanent life insurance, to be more specific, because it's not only given me so much, it's given my clients so much, my family so much. And I've seen it work in ways that no one ever knew that it really was possible. And it's not a magic pill. We can't just, create money out of thin air, but it gives you so much in terms of control and also flexibility. It's an amazing process to go through to understand what it is to use life insurance, especially the keystone to your entire wealth plan, your retirement plan, self-financing plan with infinite banking, however you want to build that foundation of financial well-being. Joe and I have spent countless hours on the golf course and a little bit in the conference room, educating clients when we were working together. I learned all I know about sales and true financial planning from Joe. I owe him everything in my career. His mentorship helped me mirror his empathy for those who were in the dark about life insurance. And for agents out there that are listening, the secret to your success, here's the secret right here. I'm going to give it to you right up front before the podcast even starts. The secret to your success is to give people what they want to buy, not what you have to sell. But the kicker in this business is that nobody wants to buy life insurance until they realize they do. It's your job to educate, not to sell. It's my job to promote life insurance as a financial planning tool, as a retirement tool, as a self-financing tool with infinite banking. But it's your job to go out there and truly educate people on why they want it. Not that they need it, but why they want it. And with that, I give you Joe Kane. Joe Kane is pretty much my, not only business mentor, but I can say that he is my surrogate father. Since I lost my father in 2007, and even before that, he is someone that I truly trust and truly admire. And I get to, it was close to 13 years that I got to work with him. And we had a pretty good, successful run. And now we are collaborating here on my podcast with everybody watching and seeing, if we can really spread the love of life insurance the way that Joe and I have. Joe is near the end of his sales career with life insurance and financial services. And he is transitioning that over into one of his many successful agencies. He's transitioning that to either the next generation or the next owner. or the next president. I'll let him talk a little bit about that because I think he's in search of somebody. And to a little bit later on, we'll get into the gist of, why I really wanted to have this webinar and this podcast and have it be recorded for people to really understand why they need human life value death benefit in their life. It's something that I've sung the praises of ever since 2003, since I met Joe. Yes, mother, I am staying off the road. My mother just sent me a text. I did go to the grocery store a while ago, though. That's Mama Joe. Since 2013, ever since Joe recruited me off the golf course, our good dear friend, bless his heart, Van Clark, who introduced us. We started with LEAP, and as we all know, LEAP, the cornerstone is whole life insurance. And having that conversation with somebody about, life insurance and talking about, your inevitable mortality, that one day you will die, but using that to your advantage in your financial life. Joe and I can go on and on. That's why I didn't set an end time for this podcast. So we want to get into it. Joe, why don't you tell a little bit of the people out there exactly who you are and a little bit of your background, and I hope you talk about your boot making business a little bit.
Well, thank you. You're very kind, Brandy, Joe. So the quick version is I started in the business in 1987 in McAllen, Texas, and we were in the middle of a depression back then. The unemployment rate in Hidalgo County was north of 22% the year I started, and it was life insurance sales, and it was really old school. And we started with a program that had been developed by Tom Wolfe that was has since become a cornerstone of the industry, and that's the financial needs analysis. And so I learned that process and would sit down with clients and absolutely hated it. And I came home one day and my wife, and back then all the appointments were in the evening. You would book a 6 o'clock appointment and you would book an 8 o'clock appointment. And so I came home and it was probably close to 10 o'clock and the kids were asleep. And Mary says, so did you make a sale? And I said, yes, I did. Well, you don't look very happy. And I said, Mary, I feel like I committed the most egregious form of emotional blackmail that a human can commit and have it be legal. And so they bought, but I don't feel good about it. I didn't get an MBA, and it just doesn't feel right. It feels manipulative, and I don't know if I can do this long term. Which is funny because here we are over 30 years later and here we are, right?
Yeah.
But that was really the beginning. That was the genesis of a search for a way, if I was going to stay in that business, in that industry. And I came from a very varied background. When I got out of college, I worked for my dad in the steel fabrication business. I did that for a number of years. Found a buyer for his company and ended up as an entrepreneur going into the cowboy boot manufacturing business. I had a factory in Mexico and one in Mercedes, Texas, and our brand back then was the Crown Boot Company. And when things got so bad in the mid-'80s with the oil and gas catastrophe, the savings and loan crisis, the banking crisis, most of the retailers, and they were large, big companies, names that you would recognize, were having huge financial problems and filing bankruptcy. And it turned out that my partner was embezzling money as well. So I ended up liquidating the company and needed something to do. And that's how I got into the business. So I come from a very entrepreneurial background.
But it was from a newspaper ad, right?
I answered an ad in the newspaper, and to sell life insurance, and I had some offers, pharmaceutical industry. City of McAllen wanted me to run their economic development corporation because I grew up in Mexico and I'm bilingual and understand the culture. But they paid a salary, and I've always been an entrepreneur. And when I found out what the salary was, and I found out
people that want to get into real estate,
it wasn't just here's how to flip a house. It's here's how to have it.
Sorry.
It's all right. And I found out in the pharmaceutical industry what their top rep was. And then I found out in the life insurance business what the number one producer in the agency was. I thought, I don't know if I can do it, but if he can do it, I can do it. So I jumped in, and it's been great. It's been nothing, but I've been very blessed. I've been very blessed.
Yeah.
I got into management with that company, did well, was top 25 in the company 3 years in a row, got promoted. They changed the comp. The head of the agency wanted my unit, and so politically I got squeezed, went back to McAllen, opened a Western wear store, and started an agency for a major company, and it's still there today.
Mm-hmm.
Did great. They moved me, and that was fine, but I realized that in their system I could not be entrepreneurial, and so a friend of mine had become a general agent with a major New York mutual company, and so we talked and we agreed to be partners. And so as partners, we started a scratch agency and built it to the 8th largest agency in their world, reached master agency level in 8 years, which is a huge accomplishment. It doesn't mean anything if you're not in the industry, but it's an incredible milestone. And sadly, after 14, 15 years of 2 captains fighting for the helm of the ship, it was time to do something different. And I started our current agency right at 10 years ago, and we consistently have been at the top of their, another great mutual company, at the top of their production, and we won the Chairman's Trophy last year, which was wonderful to get to do that in my lifetime.
Was that the first time you won it?
That's the first time, okay. Because that's when, that's when you win all the marbles.
Right.
And so it was great to get to do that. But what has been behind that has been really an exposure to economics-based planning. I got to meet Bob Castellone in like 1988, might have been 89.
Which,
flew up to,
just a little bit of background, Bob Castellone invented the LEAP model. And if you're in the business, you understand LEAP systems and the economic wealth model and all that. And it was a selling tool. It was a system.
Well,
it was more than that, I on the surface.
I think Bob is a genius, frankly.
Absolutely.
And, because he had the creativity to take economics and apply it to individual life insurance planning. And so what happened is we had a real series of empirical mathematical models that we could build that were holistic. And so it was, when I saw that, it just, Bob and I got into an argument the first time that I met him.
Of course you did.
I was young and arrogant back then. And I said, there's no way I'm giving this guy my money. And so I left and didn't become licensed. And it was only about 4 or 5 years later when I became licensed and I got to see Bob and meet him for the second time. And congratulate him on the fact that by virtue of waiting, I got to pay him twice as much money for the use of his tools. And he laughed and I laughed. And so we got to be good friends after that. And but I really credit Bob with a lot of my early education in economics and understanding really how holistic models can work for individual planning, and more importantly, the role that life insurance plays as part of an overall financial package. Because the reality is life insurance is a tool, and mutual funds are tools, and other investments are tools. And so if we're going to really understand that economics are the optimization, if you will, of scarce resources, right? That's what the word economics means. It goes back to the management of scarce resources. So how do we do that, right? How do we create the greatest amounts of efficiency for a family, an individual, and how do we do it in a way that attempts to reduce risk, and how do we do it in a way that creates the greatest output and the greatest level of security, right? Because those are the goals. It's not that we can always accomplish that.
But I think I think sometimes get mired down in that when they're looking at the bigger picture, they don't understand the importance of having that today. They always look at it like, oh, I have to have that tomorrow. And so they keep pushing it off and really, kicking the can down the road when they should be fixing the problem right now.
Well, no doubt. And some of that is behavior, right? So part of my study, if you will, over the years has been to spend a lot of time trying to understand behavioral finance, right? How do we make decisions? Why do we make some of the decisions that we do? And the reality is the pain of loss, or the thought of a loss, has a lot more immediacy to people than the idea of gain. So we would sit down with people and using some of the economic modeling, show them how by virtue of having greater efficiencies, they would have $1 million of additional capital when they retired.
Right.
And they would go on and do nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
and we would scratch our heads, Brandy Joe. It's like, what? It's $1 million. And yeah, okay. And that was really hard to understand because I was very proud of creating this phenomenal planning tool, right? And showing it to them and how they're going to have 7 figures, $1 million more.
$1 million more, not just $1 million, $1 million more.
No, additional,
right,
on top of what they would have had, right? And it wouldn't do anything. And it really, it would madden me, but it took some time to understand that as humans, we don't respond to numbers, right? It's what numbers do,
mm-hmm.
right? And so what I realized, it wasn't a client's fault. It was my fault because I didn't help them understand what $1 million really translates to. And so along the way, one of the reasons that I was able to have success and grow a firm, an agency, and attract quality people like you, Brandy Joe, and others, is because people were excited about being able to communicate how you can have more, right, in your life. And it isn't only by throwing money at investments. It's having all the pieces in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about building a house, an office building, right, you don't just put a bunch of windows up. You don't just put chimneys up. You have to have the foundation, and you have to have the walls, and you have to have the interior, exterior. You have to have all the pieces to put together a successful home. Well, guess what? Our financial and economic lives are the exact same. If we only have windows, right, we'll have a lot of windows, but we won't have a home. If we only have a foundation, right, we'll have a foundation 10 feet thick, but we don't have a home, right? And so we've got to have all the pieces if we're going to have a home. And so that was the big aha about economics-based planning. But part of economics-based planning, and I want to bring it kind of full circle to human economic value, human life value, human economic value, is if you think about efficiency, what we're trying to do is maximize resources. So part of what we have to do is maximize protection along the way, right? And so then we get into the protection conversation. And why is protection important? And again, as humans, right, when we're young, we're all bulletproof, we're all invulnerable. You know, I thought for a number of years I had to be Superman's brother, or at least Batman's brother.
Yeah,
right?
I've experienced that over the last few years, and I am not Superwoman.
Right, and so but that's part of maturity, but along the way, right, so we tend to procrastinate, we tend to put things off because it ain't going to happen to us.
Right.
And so when we really boil down to the protection aspects, right, so life insurance is like a Swiss Army knife. It has a lot of different blades and functions and screwdrivers and you know, it can do a lot.
Everything. That's the whole
It can do a lot of different things.
Right.
But it's still a knife, right? Meaning that it's still protection. And so the thing that I really have always felt is that understanding the protection piece is critical. And so part of the conversation that evolved is working with clients. I found myself to be very challenged with financial needs analysis. And the reason is it's needs-based planning. And so I want to take a minute, Brandy Jo, if it's okay, just to kind of describe needs-based planning.
Please. Go for it.
So the evening I came home, and again, I had a successful sale. But I went through a process where you sit down and when you get to the needs-based planning is you talk about, well, how much money do you think you need to be buried? You know, the coffin, the funeral, the flowers, what do you think that'll run? And so you identify a number. And then now let's talk about having an emergency fund, you know, because the water heater goes out and the roof might need to be replaced and the insurance, you know. And now let's talk about the college fund for your children. Now let's talk about having some liquidity for unexpected but not emergency, right? And now let's talk about an income piece. And so you're arm wrestling the client the whole time.
Yeah.
I had an agent who, when I was a sales manager, that was the platform that we used, and this person went on to become a very successful attorney because she didn't like our business. So the experience that she had was she's brand new, and I go on some joint calls with her, and now she's going to sell them. It's like flying an airplane by yourself.
Yeah.
The first real appointment you're doing with a client without having a co-pilot. And so I tell her, you know, call me. What time's your appointment? 6 o'clock. Okay, call me when you're done. I want to hear the blow by blow. So 7 o'clock, so it's 6 o'clock appointment. 7 o'clock comes and goes. 7:30 comes and goes. 8 comes and goes. Now I'm really getting worried because I'm really beginning to worry about the client. 8:30 and my phone rings, and this slightly slurred voice tells me I quit.
It's hard.
And I say slightly slurred because what had happened is she went in and starts talking about how much do you think you need, right, for the funeral and the flowers and the casket and all of that. And so the husband starts saying, well, I'm going to pick a number, I don't remember exactly, $20,000. And his wife says, no, you don't. Well, why not? Because I'm donating your body to science. The hell you are. No, that's exactly what I'm doing. And they get into this big argument, and 30 minutes later, they're still fighting, and she excuses herself, calls her husband, and they go to a bar. And that was the end of her life insurance career.
Yeah.
And so That's a true story, Brandy Joe,
I'm sure,
but it speaks to, right, that kind of one of the problems is you end up arm wrestling over things that don't matter. And the other thing, and here's the real issue, the much bigger issue, and I didn't understand that in the beginning. It was only after I really understood economics-based planning that I had this aha. If you go online, there are probably thousands of needs-based calculators that will tell you how much life insurance you and your family need. And if you go through the exercises, invariably the result tends to be between 7 and 10 times your income, almost invariably. And so if you think about it, whether you have a licensed agent, right, work with you, come to your home, come to your office, you go to their office, you're working with a professional, or you go online, the result invariably is within that range. There are a few exceptions if you fudge some numbers, but generally speaking, it's 7 to 10 times your income. And here's the issue. The issue is that if you are 40 or younger, any major insurance company will give you 30 times your income in coverage. And if you're 50, 40 to 1 to 50, they'll give you 20 times. Or 15, if you're 50 to 60, 51 to 60.
So what do you think?
Think about it.
What do you think keeps people from buying when that is so cheap in just term insurance?
Well, can I circle back to that?
Sure.
Because I think that I think the issue is that they don't understand the risk, right, is part of it. So if our office building, right, were worth 30 million bucks, and the commercial liability person said, let's just insure it for 15, is that a problem? Think how much money we'll save in premiums. Is that a problem? Well, the answer is no, right, as long as you don't have a fire.
Yeah.
You save money. But if you have a fire and you're $15 million short, it's a catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the issue is if the commercial liability or fire insurance salesperson doesn't tell them your building was worth 30 million, or the owner doesn't know it and they insure it for less, right? There's a real problem. And that would be a lawsuit in the commercial liability, in the commercial fire business. So people, I think, don't buy it because A, they don't believe it'll happen to them, or B, they don't understand why that number is 30 times their income or 20 times their income.
Right. They don't understand their inevitable human life value, human economic value.
Right, but they don't understand when they get it, they tend to want it. So here's a conversation, right, that is a very common conversation with clients. So instead of, let's divorce ourselves from needs-based planning intellectually just for a minute, right? And instead, let's look at what the legal profession does in a wrongful death lawsuit, okay? So the story is you're driving to work, okay? And coming kind of through the intersection is a guy driving a major beer company's truck. And he had an argument with his spouse the night before. Is that a possibility?
Totally.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And so while he's driving, right, his phone buzzes because a text just came in. And thinking it might be his wife, he glances down at his phone. Is that a possibility?
Totally.
Right? Have you ever done that?
Yes,
while you're
I
driving,
have.
look down at your phone? Okay.
Yes, I have.
And so we all have, right? And so right at that time, the light changes. You're in the middle of the intersection, and he T-bones you. And the next thing you know, you're knocking on the pearly gates, right? So what do you want to have happen, right? What do you want to have happen at that point, financially, for your family? Right?
Everything to be
and so it's a major
golden parachute.
It's a major beer company, right? And and they're not even American because they were bought out by some Belgian firm or something, right? And they have huge liability, right, or whatever, right? So they have huge liability policies just to protect the company, right? And so you want, right? You're not here, but you would want your spouse to get the meanest, baddest legal barracuda possible.
Absolutely.
And sue the snot out of it. Right? So now, right, they're going to figure out how much were you worth, right? Because there's a process, right? This happens all the time. And so there's a process. So what is the process that the legal industry uses? Well, they calculate your human economic value. And so they take, right, they'll get an expert witness, generally an economist, and that expert witness will ask a lot of questions, right? What was your profession? What was your job? How much were you making? Where do you rank in your income within your profession, right? So if you're a lawyer, you could be like Joe Jamel, right, and win $1 billion from Pennzoil, or you can be an ambulance chaser, or anywhere in between, right?
Or the lawyer in
Right.
Houston that sued all the Vioxx takers and got millions of dollars.
Right?
I have a friend on Facebook that works for him.
Okay, so just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean that you make a lot of money, and so they want to look, where do you compare? And your level of education, and what's the upside, right, for your income growth in your profession compared to other professions. So if you're a farmer, it may not be as, you may not have the upside that someone who designs software games may have.
Yeah.
Right? And so they look at all that and they try and map out what your future income could be. And then they do a simple financial calculation, right? In the finance world, we call it net present value, right? And all it is the lump sum equivalent, right, adjusted for the time value of money, of what all your future income would be, and from the day you died to the day that you would have normal retirement. And that's human economic value, right? And as an aside, when the 9/11 Commission got together and were calculating the awards for the victims of 9/11, I read the report, and what they did was to determine human economic value for each of the people, and they fudged some numbers and added some, but at its core, the initial basic fundamental calculation was that net present value of future income, which we call human economic value.
Right.
And that's what they did, right? Because that's the process. So there's some questions, right? So God forbid the inevitable, the bad happens, right?
Tomorrow, for anybody.
Should it matter to your family if you get hit by a beer truck or if you get hit by lightning? From a financial point of view,
or just spin off the road to a
matter.
telephone pole.
But it shouldn't matter, right?
No, it shouldn't.
But here's a different way. Here's a different way to look at it. And here's something, Brandy Joe, that I think it kind of comes back to why didn't people respond to the $1 million? Because they don't understand what it means. And so here's how I want to really help people understand human economic value, right? So if someone is married, the question would be, do you remember the day that you got married?
I do.
Okay. So do you remember what you promised your spouse?
Yes, I do, because it was not very long ago. Yes.
Okay, so it's everything, right? It's the have and hold, sickness and health, but it's your heart and your treasure, right? Mm-hmm. It's everything. So if you think about what human economic value is, as you walk down the road of life, hand in hand with your partner, if you reach normal retirement, you will have delivered human economic value to your partner.
That's basically,
That's
yes.
all it is.
Yeah.
So if you're not here, right, wouldn't you want them to have what you were going to deliver anyway if you finished the journey?
I do, because I understand it. Yes.
Right. So it's the same thing whether you're here or you're not here. And I think when people understand that, Brandy, Joe, my experience has been the vast majority of the time they want to have it.
Mm-hmm. And you really, I mean, and so with the big life insurance, the big life insurance companies that are out there, the New York-based companies, when they're putting their commercials on Sunday afternoon golf coverage, they have 30 seconds to convey that. And it doesn't come off as an economic question. It comes off as, you should just basically do this because we're trying to sell you something. But having the math and the economic balance behind it, I think makes all the difference in the world if we can just get enough people to sit down, listen, and really want to be educated. Because we all know if we have to, go ahead.
I'm not into conspiracy theories, Brandy, Joe.
No, but, never.
But I do, I know, right? But I do think that if you're an insurance company and you're managing pooling risk, would you rather have a lot of smaller claims, or would you rather have many smaller claims or a few big claims? And you'd really rather have a bunch of small claims. It's right. Why most car insurance policies have low deductibles and low liability limits, right? Mm-hmm. Because they try and sell you on you only have $200 out of pocket, right?
Yeah.
But if you get sued, they're only going to pay $100,000.
If that. And
if that, right?
The levels in Texas just went up to 30 and 60, which is still atrocious financially.
Right. And so I would rather handle a $1,000 claim and have them handle the $1 million lawsuit than me handle, right, $200 and anything over 100, right, in a major lawsuit. And so it's kind of how insurance companies are, which is we've over the years stressed them quite a bit by having them understand human economic value and be willing to offer that kind of coverage, and they all do now.
I think we've done it,
but they didn't always.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, right? But they didn't always. But so when someone is presented with something just like, okay, well, it's 30 times your income, well, you're just trying to sell me a big policy. If I really understand, right, that the purpose of insurance is economic replacement. If a $30 million building burns down, I want to have $30 million. If I have a machine in my factory that represents $1,000 a day of profit, that's $365,000 a year, right? I want to have that machine insured for an amount that will replace $365,000 a year, right? If it's stolen.
Yeah, if it breaks.
Right, so it's replacement. And so we have to look at ourselves as economic generators in our families. And so what's our replacement value? Solomon Huebner in The Economics of Life Insurance, which was written, I don't know, maybe in the 20s, way back then, talked about that, is that the proper amount of life insurance that a human should own is their full economic replacement value.
Right.
So needs has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with need. It's about the value of replacement. So when people are presented with it, they have typically one of three responses. Yes, I do want to have it. No, I don't want to have it. Or how much does it cost?
Right.
Right. And so if we are think through, right, yes is pretty easy. How much does it cost? I have no idea, right? Because I don't have X-ray vision. You look pretty good, but we have to do lab tests or do underwriting, and then we'll get a company to make an offer. But typically, that's a budget question, right? And not a. I don't want it. When the answer is no, right, then there's something else going on. And it really has nothing to do with economics. It typically has either someone was raised a certain way or they have an issue with their spouse, right? And we can probe and ask questions, but it really doesn't have anything to do other than a personal issue.
Right. Now let me ask you, because we do have some agents on the call on the broadcast. Is that person now written off your list and then they're nurtured kind of the back way? Do you just stop the conversation there?
No, because I'll ask anybody anything.
Right. I mean, you and me.
So
I'm talking about regular agents.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. So why do you feel that way?
Yeah, and I've asked that question, and usually the response, I'll never forget this, in Louisville, Texas, talking with a used car salesman, he said, I didn't have that opportunity, so why should my daughter have that opportunity? Talking about human life value, because he actually
right. No, and I get that.
Yeah.
And so then we get to talk about the capital, right? The importance of having capital.
Well, then we get to talk about. Then we get to have the living benefit conversation. Well, it's not.
Well, but it's
for you too.
So let's talk about capital, right? In the Bible, it says that a good person is someone who delivers flocks to his children and his children's children that are bigger than the flocks that they receive.
Amen.
And whether you take that from a spiritual point of view or just a pretty good guideline for human development and families, however you take that, right, it's a concept of the value of capital. And so when I think about that guy, he clearly has a resentment that his dad left him, right? So he had an emotional severance and there was hardship.
Yeah.
And he hadn't gotten beyond that, right?
That's really good, Joe.
But the tragic thing is, why in the world, right? And you know, the old saying is, the sins of the fathers are passed on through generations, right? The price is paid by the children and the children's children. Why should his daughter pay the price for something that her grandfather didn't take care of?
Right, but that's...
Why wouldn't he want to fix that, right? And I would have that conversation.
Yeah, that's perpetuating the angst and anxiety.
I would have that very direct conversation, because I think the importance that we are not number crunchers. We're counselors, we're advisors, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I'm going to be, if I'm going to have value to someone, it's because I'm going to look them in the eye, right? And tell them, right, that this is a tragedy that happened to them, but why would they perpetuate that?
Right.
And I may get, you know, it's none of your damn business and I'm out of here, but okay.
At least you know.
But at least I did my part, right?
Right.
So I have a client whose human life value, young person, very successful commercial realtor, whose human economic value is $5 million.
Mm-hmm. Like.
And they smoke.
Oh.
Right.
Ow.
So then you start adding, okay, the premium's going to be a little bit higher, right? But term insurance is pretty cheap. So when he and his wife came in, when he and his wife came in, they each had 500,000. He had 500 of coverage. She had 250. Mm-hmm. His human economic value is $5 million.
Yeah.
So he settled on $3 million for him and $2 million for her. Okay.
Okay.
So they're not at her human economic value was around 3. She has a great job, making $100 a year. She settled for 2, and he settled for 3. So they were at 500 and 250. Is that a bad thing?
No. More is
No,
more.
I can sleep at nighttime, right? Because they understood what was available to them, and they made a choice that this is what I want to have.
So was that
right?
Was that a budget decision, or was that I don't think I'm worth $5 million?
No, that was we don't have kids, and I can go back to work, or I can take care of myself.
So still a little bit of an
because
emotional, uncertain.
it was sure.
Yeah.
But to get them, so it's their clients, right? And we get to have the ongoing education, and we meet and do that, right? But my point is, I'm okay talking about human economic value. If I tell you this is what you can have, and you decide on something less, but it's significantly better than where you were, right? I can say, okay, right? I want you as a client so we can continue the dialogue, right? And the reality is, if God forbid something happened and she came into $3 million, it wouldn't be the same life she has today, but it would be okay.
Yeah. I mean, she wouldn't have her husband.
Right. But financially, I'm talking,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She would be okay. So there's some of that enters into it.
Right. So in that process, going from, pure protection, which is what term insurance is, and then having the conversation of, okay, this term insurance is basically a Band-Aid. It is a way to protect today, tomorrow, and maybe 10 years down the road. If you're doing 20-year term, really 18 years down the road. So let's talk about taking that term insurance, which is a cost, off the top, and then talk about the conversion and why you want to use that for permanent insurance, not only for retirement, which is pretty much going away, getting to a passive income state, and then also using that as a way to deploy capital and using it as a tool to collect more cash flow and capture that cash flow. But let's talk about the conversion process first.
So I think you just outlined about 10 podcasts.
I know.
With that, because you just outlined the encyclopedia, which is awesome. It is. So, so term insurance, right? Let's just talk briefly about conversion and term insurance.
Okay. Hold on. I marketed this as using a piece of pie to convert pieces of the term insurance that you have into like pieces of a pie to convert over time. And so here's the pie. And Justin Mooney, who is on YouTube right now, he told me I was going to get sick, and I said, you don't know how big the pie is. So it's a small little pie. We used to.
Hey, it's almost lunchtime. It's making me hungry.
Yeah, it's 11:45 here. We used to use term insurance as in context of, volumes of protection that you can turn into, a little bit of an economic tool to foster your future and foster your retirement, finance other investments, finance businesses, all of that kind of, capital deployment. And so what I wanted to do here was to let people know that it's not just converting one big chunk from term to permanent. It's converting it over time, because if you into pieces, because if you have someone who's in their late 20s, early 30s, they're going to work for 30, 35, maybe 40 years in their job, and as inflation and the Federal Reserve does its job, more and more people are going to make more and more money. So that human life value, I believe, goes up in value. And if you just stop it with term insurance, I think you're selling yourself short in terms when you understand that your true human economic value. And it's not just about
No
taking
doubt.
that one big chunk, like your example of the client who took $3 million. Next year, he's not going to convert $3 million of term insurance over into $3 million of permanent, unless, he sells a big piece of, whatever he's doing
Right.
for a living, and all of a sudden he turns
Right.
into the next Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or whatever. Which there
Right.
are people out there that do that. They come into
It happens.
what is
It
called a windfall, and then what do you do with that money?
Right.
A windfall.
So part of it is understanding term insurance, right? There are many people who, because of advertising, believe that buying term insurance is like buying 3 pounds of beans, right?
Okay.
It doesn't matter, right? It's 3 pounds of beans.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what grocery store I get it from. It's 3 pounds. It doesn't really matter what the brand is. It's 3
Right.
pounds of beans, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, even if buying beans, right, they're graded differently. Some are cleaner, some have more dirt, more rocks, more whatever. But the important thing about term insurance is that they're contracts, right? These are contracts. And when you think about contracts, you have to understand that they're written by lawyers. And so the language matters, the features matter. And not all term insurance is created equal. They're not the same, because they have different features, right? Different conversion features.
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely want human economic value, and most of our clients have some, maybe a significant amount, maybe all of it in term insurance when they first start, right? Depending on the economic circumstances that the client's in when we meet them. But you want to be able to convert it, as you're saying, right? Because you want to understand where permanent life insurance, specifically dividend paying, participating, mutual company, whole life, fits in as part of your overall financial and economic plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? So it's the ability to convert to that, right? And yes, to do it. And so what does it mean to convert? It means that basically you sign a piece of paper and give the insurance company money, and they exchange the term with no medical underwriting for a whole life policy at the same rating that the term policy had. Right.
There is not, let me do a little background. There is not any financial, except for escrowing your health, basically saying, okay, I'm 28 and I'm going to get full human life value term insurance. And if I wait until I'm 45 to convert all of it permanent, I'm still going to get the same life insurance rating, underwriting, classification as when I was 28. There's no additional underwriting.
Correct. That's correct.
But the price tag for that conversion so late in that term, if we're using 20 years as a term, the price tag for that in terms of just base premium for death benefit is pretty significant. And that's where it becomes an economic question later on.
Well, there's no question that the mortality cost of life insurance is lower when you're younger.
Yay.
Right. and so you want to get all they'll give you at the youngest age possible.
Yeah.
But we sell a tremendous amount of life insurance to people in their 50s and 60s. And I'm talking about whole life, because as a piece of their portfolio, if you will, and I don't refer to life insurance as an investment, but of their portfolio of assets.
Right.
It's a critical piece to maximize their retirement income. So whole life insurance is a critical tool in 2 stages of your economic life. It's a critical tool while you're in the accumulation phase, right? While you're working, mm-hmm. You're building assets, you're building wealth, you're building net worth. And it's a critical piece in the distribution phase, right? So other than
Yes.
that, you're pretty good to go, right? Accumulation, distribution, right? And so it's really interesting, Brandy Joe, because the investment industry, right, which has a much bigger ad budget than the insurance industry does, has put out a message over the years that you should buy term insurance and invest the difference.
Which, if there is any data out there, I bet 80% of Americans who are considered investors and people with some substance and capital and a little bit of assets, that's what they're doing. The majority, that's what they're doing. Do you agree?
Because they don't know any better. Yes,
Exactly.
I do.
They don't.
They don't
Yeah.
know any
Ignorance is bliss, and oh my God, here we go. I don't need to know any of that. But if more people have bigger lost opportunity costs because they don't know something, rather
Right.
than, that's the old adage, and it's our job as advocates, as I am, not an agent anymore, and you and the agents on the call and the people that are my friends that are watching on Facebook, it's our, a little bit of a woo-woo-ness, but a little bit of a calling to educate these people and to give them, the tools to find out, which is why I'm doing this podcast.
Well, they haven't been told the whole story, Brandy Joe. So, if you think about owning term insurance as opposed to permanent whole life and putting money in the market, it's because 10 is bigger than 4, meaning the 10% return historical in the market's greater than the current 4% on your cash value in your life insurance.
Yeah, and
right? So you do that arithmetic.
Right.
And it's an easy conversation, but that ignores an awful lot of the story. So think about, we're in a court of law.
Okay.
Right? And I'm the prosecutor and you're the defendant. And I give them only the information, right? The jury, I'm telling the jury and present the information that makes my case. And I don't allow the information for your defense to be shown to the jury.
Yeah.
What's the verdict? You're guilty.
Right.
Right. And so what's happened is the public hasn't seen the rest of the information, because when they see it and they go, oh, well, that's why it makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you're in the accumulation phase, right, the story that we've been told is that you're always better off if you pay cash, right? Save your money, get out of debt, pay cash. Well, that's really good advice, except you destroy the power of compound interest.
Right.
And I forget who it was, might have been Lord Rothschild or somebody, but they basically said, or might have been Einstein, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. Right? It's this fabulous thing. And so why in the world would I ever want to destroy compounding, right? If I'm in the accumulation phase, if I'm trying to grow wealth, right? Compounding of money, of wealth, is something that is really critical. Why in the world would I knowingly destroy that? And so when people finally get that understanding, they want to own permanent life insurance.
And that's
right. So
right. That's that's getting over into the uninterrupted compounded growth. How that works inside of a policy is, it's not miraculous. Right. It's how a policy is structured. Do you and there's some other organizations out there that one wrote a book on basically how to bridge the gap between paying cash for everything and then using the financing mechanisms inside of a whole life policy to basically destroy the Federal Reserve. I don't think that can ever happen because, again, there's more powerful sheep, but we're all sheep. And I don't think that can ever happen. But this is a question from Justin here on YouTube. Do you think the industry as a whole is reluctant to educate people on that? Because I really think people are now getting to pretty much the tipping point of trying to find alternative methods to get yield, number one, and then the use of their money on top of that. me being
So,
the marketer and the researcher, I know that those people are out there. I can just tell by my YouTube channel.
So here's my belief. And again, I'm 30 years in the business, and
so you should know.
So but it's I've seen a lot, right? And so when I look at the financial services industry, it's a spectrum, right? It's a very broad spectrum. On one hand, you have the investment people, and it's only about the market and rate of return and how awesome growth can be if we manage your money. On the other side of the spectrum are the life insurance people who it's, the Pirates of Manhattan, the Wolves of Wall Street. If you don't know who the mark at the table is, you're probably the mark. The fees are going to eat your lunch, right? And so the problem with only using fixed instruments is that you don't have enough return. The reality is in the middle, right? The reality is if you were to pick that pie up, there's a top and a bottom. There are two sides, right? And so the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Right. It's not on the outside. It's kind of in that middle. It's using all of it.
Right.
And,
I mean, it's the circle spectrum. Yeah.
Right.
That's a good.
And so
good
economic leverage comes from combining the power of interest rates, which is compound growth, and that's to some extent the market, with actuarial science, right?
Well,
and
most people don't understand that they don't have that's the financial power conversation. They don't understand that they have both of those sides. They have the actuarial power and the compounding power.
So
they think they only have the compounding power.
Right. So the real conversation, right, is the banking people are really only talking about the accumulation phase.
Right.
And they've neglected what do you do, right, when you're going to retire? What happens at that point?
How?
And so if we're
that is where that conversation stops.
Right. And so if we're really going to be economics based, right, and manage scarce resources, we have to look at all of it, right? The distribution phase is just as important as, it may be more so, than the accumulation phase, because it's the result of the accumulation phase.
Right.
It's the life you're going to live once you hang up your running shoes. And so for
your golf clubs.
Exactly, right? Well, hopefully you never do that. But Stephen Covey, right, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says in his book, right, that you start with the end in mind. So if I'm sitting here and I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50, 55, 60, I'm still working, right? What is the end, right? What is it that I want? What is the life that I want to live, right, beyond when I'm doing what I'm doing for income today, right? If success is having enough money, right, so if having enough money working for you so you don't have to work for money, if that's the definition of success, if we can agree on that, right, then what does it look like? What is it you want to do? Do you want to travel the world?
Yeah.
Do you want to, right? Do you want to play golf?
You give yourself choices.
You want to paint? What is it you want to do? What is the life you want to live? And how are you going to accomplish that?
Right.
And so if you understand the distribution side of the puzzle, then when you're working with clients who are still in the accumulation phase, right, I'm going to come back to that home analogy, right? If I know the kind of home, I know what you want to have, then I can, while you're still working, put the pieces in place so that when you get there, it'll be there for you.
Right.
And it takes all of the financial.
And that's,
I hesitate to use the word
I know you do, but hey, I can say it. But there is, I have seen the portion that can be guaranteed to give somebody that buffer, if you will, to have at least a majority of the retirement income guaranteed. Income, not just the big pile guaranteed, but the income guaranteed until they meet St. Peter at the pearly gates. And that's
Sure.
That's what this is
So
all
why do
about. I mean,
people
this
like
is not just a
pensions?
one and done podcast. I mean, we're gonna keep talking about
Yeah.
this until I'm blue in the face, until people get it.
Right.
It's
Why do people like pensions, right? Because it's guaranteed income.
Yeah, I mean, I
Right.
have a friend who's that Claudia plays golf with over in Houston, and I think we were caddying. He's a husband for one of the girls, and we were caddying together, and we got to talking about what we do for a living, and he's retired, and I said, well, what did you do? And he said he was an air traffic controller, and having our experience in that industry, I was like, you've got a really good pension. And he says, yes, I do. He says, how do you know that? And I said, because I've worked with that industry, and I don't understand why, they've got to let you go at a certain age. I think it's 52. But he says, I have all kinds of freedom because I chose that industry to go into. It fascinated me, but the gravy on top was all of this money that I get to have guaranteed until I'm dead. I know exactly how that pension works. And why don't people do that on their own? They don't know that they can't.
They don't know how to do it. So part of what we do is train CPAs by giving CPE, right, which is their continuing education. And part of that is educating them on the distribution side of it.
Right.
And it's astounding to me to think about financial trusted advisors for whom this is brand new information. Right, and so that comes back to if I don't work for the federal or state or county or city government, how as a private citizen, how can I create the same kind of leverage or guarantees or potential, right, pension that they would have? Yeah. And obviously it isn't an ERISA type pension. But how do I get that same kind of outcome? And so part of what we have to understand as advisors is if we understand the distribution piece, we can help people during the accumulation phase by having the right combination of assets, and that includes whole life insurance.
And this is a lifetime.
That they'll have the choices.
This is the difference between what a typical life insurance agent will do, especially on the banking side. They'll sell them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 policies and then go on down the road and not educate them about not how to use them for, gathering more assets, but not really teach them how to use it as a distribution tool, as the distribution tool.
Well, I would say that no matter what flavor of life insurance, if your strategy is to spend down the cash value of your policy in retirement, that there is very little leverage in doing that.
Yeah.
And there are much better strategies that involve life insurance, but that do not involve you spending down your cash value.
Yeah. Can we, now that we're to this point, can we speculate a little bit? In other words, gossip about people?
If we don't name names?
No, well, I am. I'm going to name a name. It's Warren Buffett. So, the talk is that he disinherited his kids and his wife. Is he still married? His family, basically. Mm-hmm. Do you really think he left them high and dry?
No.
I don't either. But that's the part that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about the fact that you can give all of your money away like he did to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But somehow, when he passes on, there's going to be a big chunk that's going to show up someplace.
Well,
that's going to be tax-free, number one. And we don't know this, but surely the smartest, the Oracle from Omaha, surely to God, he understands permanent life insurance.
What I think from some of the things that I've read is that he created trust a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And so that he gave away his assets, but they already have a lot of assets.
Right.
So he was probably being truthful in that he gave away his assets, but I think that he had already transferred a pretty significant amount of his original worth along the way to different foundations of which his children were beneficiaries. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if that were not the case.
I would be too. Just the education that he's, not education, but the motivation that he's fostered
Right.
to become an
So
investor.
I want to come back to
Sure.
us, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember in McAllen seeing Winnebagos, and there were people that would come down, and typically they were from Minnesota and Michigan and kind of the upper Midwest where the winters were brutal. And so for them to jump in an RV and drive down to the Rio Grande Valley, you know, the famous winter Texans, snowbirds, you know, was wonderful for them. And there were tons and tons of RV parks, and they would camp out, clog all the municipal golf courses, and, you know, God help you if you were in front of a Luby's at 4:45 in the afternoon, because you'd get run over when they were
Oh, that's not very
trying to get in for the Luann special. But I remember
Love
seeing on a
Luby.
couple of them. Yeah, I do too. But that's why I'm saying it was dangerous to be in front of one at 4:45
Yeah.
in the afternoon. But my point is that I remember seeing a bumper sticker a couple of times that said, I'm spending my children's inheritance.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that that's tragic. That is a tragedy. And what it told me was, right, that they were admitting that they had done such a poor job of saving and planning, that in order for them to have any kind of lifestyle, they would have to disinherit their children and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I remember way back then, Brandy Joe, thinking that's tragic.
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible. Right? Because when I think about what capital means for families, it's opportunities, right? And so we all know someone who has a special needs child, right?
Yep.
You know, we have a mutual friend who has 3 of them, and so they'll never be able to fend for themselves, and will need assistance long after they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also people that need like a special tutor because they're exceptionally gifted.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another friend whom you know, whose daughter is going to some very prestigious music school in Manhattan, and I fully expect we'll see her on the international opera circuit as a top bill star within a couple of years.
Wow.
And that school's incredibly expensive, but capital was available,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when I think about a lot of the millennials that have huge amounts of student debt, right? I can go into the causes and all that, but the net is their families did not have enough capital to provide them with that opportunity. So whether it's special needs, special opportunities, or just life, right? Maybe one of them has got the opportunity to start a business that could find a cure for cancer. We don't know. But that's why having capital within generations and families. And sadly, there are way too many families that believe that it's not possible for me to retire with enough money to maintain my lifestyle and be able to pass on significant amounts of capital.
Yeah.
And Brandy, we can change that story.
Absolutely. And I guess we want to change perspective, because many people don't think that they have the ability to do it. They don't think that they can.
But they don't know how. And most advisors don't know how either.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. They kind of stop at the sale and kind of skip and wax over the education part.
They don't know the economics of it, right?
Right.
So, but that's a whole number of different podcasts.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So we do have a lot of questions. So we're going to take a little break. I'm going to go get a fork to eat some of my pie, and we'll be right back. Because Justin wants to see me eat this pie. I know he does. Okay, so here are the questions.
Looks good.
Doesn't it?
Okay.
So here's one question. We kind of hit on it earlier, but the question, let me see where it was. I think we kind of answered Justin's about why the industry might be reluctant to promote whole life insurance as a financing tool. But we actually ran into that with one of the companies that we were working with, is that they didn't want a bunch of money coming in and then immediately coming out in terms of PUA riders, which is the cash.
Well, so here's the real issue. Okay. You have to look at it from the company's perspective.
Right.
So you have a whole life policy and you pay premiums. It doesn't matter what kind of insurance, but you pay premiums and the company invests those premiums. Right. And then someday down the road, you die, and the money that goes to your beneficiaries is significantly greater than whatever you paid in premiums. So how did they do that? Well, they didn't magic. They invested it over time. And they have to do it safely, and they have to do it conservatively. So they have, the cubicles and cubicles of financial analysts and investment analysts, and they work the money. And that's how they're able to do that, right? And so if you do a policy loan, what they have to do is to sell some of their investments, turn it into cash, and then send you the cash, and that's what a policy loan is. And they do charge an interest rate, but most companies' interest rates on their loans is lower than their portfolio return.
Most,
right? Not all, but most.
Right.
And so what does that mean? It means they lower their portfolio return whenever they make a policy loan. But it's one of the features, so they're happy to do that. But one of the problems is when the total assets of the insurance company, right, you look at all of them, if the amount of loans is greater than 10% of their assets, meaning of all their investments, if more than 10% are in policy loans, right, that's a significant squeeze on their overall return, and it creates some liquidity issues.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some pretty major mutual companies that are in the 15 and 16% range, and they are happy to do it for emergencies. They don't want to do it on an ongoing basis. And if everybody were doing it, they would have to discontinue the process because it doesn't work at the insurance company level when everyone is doing it. And so it's not magic. It's just they've got to manage their assets, and if too much of it is loaned out, right, it creates some financial pressure to deliver the kind of dividends that they want to be able to deliver.
And I like that you just mentioned the word financial pressure. I had one of my subscribers call me last week, and he says, okay, I'm ready to go. I need to know what to do. I want to start using infinite banking, which we can say that we can. Mm-hmm. I want to use infinite banking because that's what he has been educated about. He likes that. Mm-hmm. He likes the message. Mm-hmm. I want to use infinite banking to get back on track with retirement. He had some issues, from the Great Recession from 2008 until 2016, and now he's back on top. And my response was, your need for financing right now is much less than your need to secure your retirement income. Mm-hmm. And it's all, the way that you build the policy, it's not that you're going to put everything into. Somebody calling you?
I just turned it off.
There you go. it's not that it's not that you're going to it's not that you're going to, all of a sudden next year you're going to finance your car in order to pay for retirement. That is the dumbest argument or angle for selling life insurance that I've ever heard of. So my response to him was just the need for financing your retirement is a bigger need than financing your lifestyle. So with that, can you talk a little bit about, because he's 50, mid 50s. Everybody's working again. Everybody's making money. They have money. And can you talk a little bit about, that conversation of how to change the conversation from self-financing to, I guess, self-capitalizing? Can we say that in order for retirement?
Sure.
That's what he's worried about. What keeps him up at night is that he is not going to have enough money to live, not, stop working and have this great retirement, but in order to live if he has to stop working. And that's the big thing.
Well, without knowing the details, right, that's a very legitimate concern. So here's what I would say, Brandy Joe. When I think about many of the conversations that I have with Nelson, who I consider one of my mentors, because he really did open my eyes to some of this, an awful lot of this. But what I would say is he always talked about, number one, capitalizing. Right? And number two, he always talked about you have to make sure that you repay the loans. Right? And so it's not about starting a policy today and doing a loan tomorrow.
Right.
Because you have to capitalize them. And then you have to have very specific uses. Right? And one of the major proponents said you should always leave 50% of your borrowing ability in a policy available.
And to have that rule, that's hard and fast. I like that.
Right. It's a guideline, right? There are always exceptions, but it's a guideline. So you don't max out all the loan ability every day and expect, right, this to work. And so to your point, the real value when you get to retirement, right, is being able to trade assets. So there's several different strategies, and really we don't have time to go into them in great detail today.
Right.
Because that's a whole different conversation. But what I will say is when you get to retirement, the economic leverage, for the most part, comes from owning death benefit, which will allow you to spend down your other assets without disinheriting the people that you love and who love you, right? So if I can spend down my other assets, whether I annuitize them or whether I spend them, however I do that, and again, that's a whole other topic. That will give me more cash flow than just relying on income from a portfolio.
Right.
And so, but I can't do that if I don't own death benefit. So, right. If I'm 55, I want to be able to have some liquidity and access to that liquidity between now and the day I retire. But once I get there, I don't want to have a bunch of policy loans. I want to have a policy, right, that has enough in it so that the dividends, right, in the policy will pay the premiums internally. And that way, that benefit will be available. So that gives me the permission slip, if you will, to spend down my other assets. And there's some very specific strategies on how to go about doing that. But again, that's another topic for another day.
Yeah, it is. And we have one question that is a little bit off topic. And now that Claudia and I are married, we now, get, darling, we automatically got health care because, no, not automatically, but get it together. I mean, we have our same policy, right? Right. So this question is, how can we, the self-employed, plan and save with healthcare costs? For the self-employed, cost makes insurance unattainable. So the self-employment cost makes insurance unattainable, is what he's saying, because it's expensive. I mean, how are
no
you?
Doubt. Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And we get, we get a credit. I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He pays less than $100, but he gets like a $600 and something credit, which is pretty much what we get.
Yeah.
And just for, otherwise it'd be $900 for two women who never go to the doctor.
Yeah. Well, I think, this isn't a life insurance conversation, and I'm not a tax expert, and I recommend using tax experts, but health savings accounts, HSAs, allow you to use some pre-tax dollars to fund high deductible plans, which can end up, the higher the deductible, obviously, the lower the premium, right?
Right.
So I would definitely look into that as a self-employed person, a health savings account. And the additional thing is, when you're faced with high costs that are recurring and you have a mature policy, if you were to use a policy loan to pay an annual premium, you would save on the monthly bill, right? Because they have a financing cost.
Right.
So you would pay not a whole lot less, but a little bit less. And if you repaid your policy loan at the monthly rate, then in effect what you're doing is covering the interest cost and putting a little bit more money back into your policy.
Right.
And you have your cash value, right, which continues to grow and compound. So it's one of the things I've done in our office building is to go negotiate a discount on the rent and then repay my policy loan at the regular monthly and pay an annual to the building, and then just pay the policy back at the normal rent rate. So
right.
the net effect was that it didn't change the cash flow to my business, but it did increase my family savings rate.
So now that you bring that concept, really that practice of self-financing the annual rent due,
Mm-hmm.
do you pay the regular rent back to the policy? So this is a whole whiteboard conversation. You pay the regular monthly rent back into your policy. Do you pay extra? Do you put extra on top of that?
Well, here's how it would work. So say my rent is $1,500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more than that, but I'm going to use that as an example.
Round number, yes.
Right, so that's $18,000 a year. So you go to the building and say, if you pay us on January 1st, 15 grand, right? Mm-hmm. We'll give you that discount.
Yeah. So okay. you get $3,000 in the kitty. You automatically have $3,000 in earnings sitting there in your business.
Well, sure. So now I have a $15,000 policy loan, mm-hmm. which I repay at the rate of $1,500 a month. So obviously that includes the insurance interest, the interest to the insurance company, and a higher savings component. So to answer your question, yes, I do repay it at a higher rate because $15,000, mm-hmm. with an interest component isn't going to be $1,500 a month for 12 months. It'll be less.
Well, the reason that I ask,
so by paying $1,500, I'm putting more in.
Right. Well, the reason that I ask is that I had a client. This was 2014. At the time, they started a policy. About a year later, they took money out to pay off a student loan, and then mm-hmm. started to repay that policy loan. And then the insurance company sent them part of that policy loan money back and said, we can't accept, we can't accept this, but we'll accept this. We can't put any more in. I don't know.
Well, then I would say that was probably a technical issue. They may have exceeded the limits on the PUA rider, Brandy Joe.
Yeah.
And so that was a technical issue with that contract.
So they looked at that check as a PUA rider, additional PUA rider, instead of making it a policy loan. Yeah.
Well, they could have accelerated the loan payment by applying all of it. So that was a technical issue.
Yeah, that's just, you know.
Yeah.
The people who run the company, you know, they're not sitting beside us talking about concept and theory and that kind of thing. Money.
Right. And we're spitting jargon back and forth. We're going to lose some people.
Don't worry, this is about education. They got to stick with us. Another question from Facebook is, when is it too late to buy life insurance? I think this person's a little older, like older than you.
Well, here's what I would say. I have clients in their early 70s who have bought life insurance, and it made economic sense. Mm-hmm. I think when you get into your 80s, it's on a case-by-case basis, but certainly in your early 70s, under the right circumstances, health and all that, it can make sense.
But when you're talking and educating somebody of that age bracket, you know, 62 to 82 or beyond, when you're talking to them about, you know, using permanent insurance, whole life insurance as a mechanism to increase their economy as a whole, are you talking about exchanging assets? I mean, they have to have assets on the books, right? Either the asset has to be in cash flow or the asset has to be sitting there and you exchange that asset for the whole life insurance.
Correct.
Right. So you
and
really
a
can't
lot of
help anybody
times
that doesn't have anything.
Well, I mean, it isn't magic, right?
Right.
So it's leveraging dollars. A lot of times, though, for people who are older, the distribution piece can be addressed without using life insurance. Mm-hmm. You know, it could be annuities, it could be some of the riders that are available, could be certain investment products. I mean, it just depends on the individual, but it isn't always life insurance, but certainly life insurance, whole life insurance specifically, is the preferred vehicle if you can get it. Because of the leverage it gives you, which is choices, right, on how to deploy your other assets.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the really, I want to keep coming back to that. What whole life insurance allows you to do is to have choices with your other assets. So you have to have other assets to have the most number of choices. And I think sometimes those of us in the insurance industry are so focused on our product, right, that we want to put down everybody else's product. And it isn't that way, right? We got to have all of them. And the more of the other stuff you have, the more life insurance you'll want to have. The conversation I had with someone who's very wealthy, it's like he said, I don't need life insurance. And I looked him in the eye and said, you're 100% correct. You do not need life insurance. But I can tell you that people with your net worth buy tons of it because they want it, and they want to own it because of what it allows them to do and the choices it gives them. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's not about need, it's about want because of the tremendous leverage that it gives us.
Yeah.
And I'm running out of time, Brandy Joe.
I am too.
This has been a tremendous amount of fun. We need to do this again sometime.
We will. And as soon as the Arctic Circle moves beyond Austin and Dallas, Clyde and I are going to be up there and we're going to go play some golf with you.
I'd love to. If you have one more question, let's do that. And we can
let me see if I can find one. So Okay, so this question comes from an actual subscriber. When you're going through the process of really, see if I can get this right. When you're going through the process of educating everybody in the family about why permanent life insurance needs to be there in order to finance, like this person I know wrote down on their goals that they want to start investing in real estate. And the one call that we've had together is, does it really need to be taken out of the policy? Does it really, does the cash flow that they're saving, that they're making right now and they're trying to capture in these policies, does it really need to come out of the policy first, or can you use cheaper money other places? Because this goes back, he actually uses the example of, a car paying for your retirement makes no sense to him. When you finance a car and then all of a sudden you get to retire because you bought 53 Lexuses. Does it really matter about how much that money costs in the long run, or do you just want to take the revenue off of that real estate investments and then roll those into more policies?
That individual is a very bright individual because they understand money.
Yeah.
So the correct answer is, if you can get cheaper money, use cheaper money. Just make sure that when you repay, right, the loan,
right,
that you put the excess into the policy, right? You follow that practice.
Well, following the practice of, you need to charge yourself a capital rate, not just pay back the money to the cheaper loan, but also charge yourself for that asset, which is that.
And you want to have the discipline, right, of knowing that if there's an emergency, I can always pay off the bank, right, the cheaper money,
right,
and then instead of being on their timeline, I'm on mine, because I control the repayment to the insurance policy, not the policy, but the insurance company. Right. And so I'm okay using cheaper money because it's cheaper money, but I want to have the discipline of taking the overage and increasing my personal capital by using that differential going into the policy. And I also want to make sure that I have the discipline, right, to kind of keeping them in balance, so that if I have a challenge, I can always talk to the insurance company, eliminate the bank, and I'm in control, because control is a real important part of that equation.
And I think that's what we're all after. We don't want to be,
right,
as you said before, the mark at the table.
Right, but I think this individual totally gets it, and that's a great question.
Yeah. All right, Joe Kane, thank you so much. It was great to see you.
I enjoyed it. Take care, Brandy, Joe.
All right.
See you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
And this has been episode number 2 of the Brandy Joe Show. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to over 90 minutes of content in just the second episode that I've brought to you. We're going to have more content just like this, but we're also going to have more of me. And actually, next up on the show is my wife, Claudia Ramirez. We recently got married. We've been together over 17 years, but we just recently got married. We're going to talk about working through things as a married couple in today's age. Also living through kind of the transition, although I hate that word. We're going to talk about going from, late 20s on into your 40s and figuring out basically how to live with each other and how to support each other. We're also going to talk about our businesses. We're going to talk a little bit about golf. We're going to talk about a little bit about her aspirations and her goals for 2018 and how she and I are working as a team on that. And we've also added Lynn McDonald to our team to not only help my students, but to help Claudia with her golf endeavors. And if you've listened to this podcast all the way through this far and almost hitting the 2-hour mark here, I want to give you a special gift. I want to give you a 1-month trial to Infinite Banking 101, which is my online course, and to also give you a little bit of an insight on what else that we are building really at brandyjoenewman.com. If you're a golfer, I want to give you full access to all of my library of drills, practice plans, workouts, a little bit of nuances that I have. So if you have listened to this podcast this far, I want to give you that special gift. So just send me an email or reply on any of the social media posts that I have posted around the interwebs, letting me know that you have found this little gift at the end of the podcast. And also, if you're in San Antonio and you're a family or a business owner and you're wanting to know more about how infinite banking works, I'm going to take you to dinner. So anybody out there that wants to know more about infinite banking, just give me a call. Don't text or don't call while you're driving. If you're listening to this in your car, give me a call, 210-563-8595. I'm going to take you to dinner. Take you to a nice dinner, not something over the top and cushy, but something casual. Take you to dinner, talk about things, and show you really what, how infinite banking has helped me and Claudia in our personal financial life, and to really get you on the right track to, it's kind of cliche, which is financial freedom, but to really build that foundation of financial well-being. So if you've listened this far, those are three gifts for you. I want to give you 1 month to Infinite Banking 101, which is an ongoing course. And in the first month, you really learn about what infinite banking is. And you actually get to see some money moves. There's a pay off your mortgage money move. There's invest in real estate money move. There's paying off debt money move. And I coach you through all of those things. And I also give you, this is the other thing that I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you one coaching call that I usually don't give anybody in the first month unless they're paid. I'm going to give you one coaching call to go over your entire financial and personal economy, your entire financial life, talk about your goals, look at your cash flow, do a full-on coaching session with you for absolutely free. Usually those are $100. Oh. Got a little phone call there. Usually those are $135 an hour, but when you're in the Infinite Banking 101 online training course, you get one of those per month. And that's just my little gift to give back to you for sticking with me and supporting me all the way through this podcast. So with that, I'll see you next week. Actually on every Friday, live on YouTube. I just wanted to throw this in. Live on YouTube around 9 a.m. Texas time, I do a little roundup from the week. I kind of go back and share with you what interests me, what insights I had learned, and then some cute little fix-its. Claudia and I are into gadgets, so we find a lot of gadgets, and a lot of people on Instagram and social media send me training aids, and I actually received one that I'm going to go over and trying to figure out how it works. So hopefully that will entice you to tune in to me on YouTube on Friday. And that's actually on my Brandy Jo Newman YouTube account. We're going to go over that and then plug Infinite Banking as well. So with that, have a great day. Send me a text, call me. I'll take you to dinner if you're in San Antonio.